when I started to have to, receive and accept and be curious about people that I actually didn't want to spend any time with at all, I had to kind of find a way. And when I started to really work with that non-judgmental curiosity, I had such a profound experience of unconditional love that it actually changed my life. Because then I could begin to know what it might feel like for me. And if that other person's army of gremlins are okay, maybe mine are too.
Today's Into Healing guest is Karen Faith, an ethnographer, a strategist, and the visionary behind Others, a groundbreaking training curriculum for empathy, self-awareness, deeper connection, and more understanding. This is Into Healing, and I'm your host, Mira Kaddoura. A heads up that our conversation today touches upon issues related to sexual abuse and suicide. Hi, Karen.
Hi.
I'm so grateful that you're here. I found you through your TED Talk, and I remember just how moved I was by that talk, and I reached out to you, and we finally made it happen. So thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks for inviting me. It's really cool to be here. I want to tell you what I'm doing right now to try to get myself totally in the moment. And you can do it with me if you want to.
Yes.
But a little trick that I learned a long time ago is to bring my awareness to the tip of the index finger of the right hand until you can feel your heartbeat there. And it's really, you can do it in secret, like on elevators and stuff to get ready for things. But it kind of helps me because I'm, as you know, underslept and weird. So.
Is there a reason why you use the right finger, not the left finger?
Because I was taught to start there because I'm right-handed, so I'm like a little bit more connected to that hand. But it could be interesting. I mean, when I do the full practice, I actually do all 10 fingers and then 10 toes and then the whole everything. But that's a kind of, it's the easiest one to feel for me. So it's a kind of way of getting present in my skin.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about empathy.
Yeah.
What is empathy?
I do answer that question a lot. And so I've got, my way of talking about it. But I was recently encouraged to use fresh words, which is a nice way of thinking about restating something. So empathy, I think, is the practice of getting in touch with our oneness with everyone. And I've never said it that way before. So that's interesting.
I love that.
We often are taught empathy in terms of compassion, which isn't necessarily wrong, but it's a little incorrect. That compassion is a really different kind of practice. But empathy really there are three different kinds of empathy: affective, somatic, and cognitive. And that affective empathy is the one that looks the most like compassion, really caring about someone else, caring about your impact on them, caring about what they're going through. Somatic empathy is the spooky sci-fi empathy, where you really physically feel the pain, and it's almost always pain of another person, which does exist, but it's kind of rare. Some people do it.
Empaths, a lot of empaths have that.
That word is usually referring to somatic empathy. Yeah, and that's, as you may know, that's actually a pretty difficult gift to have. But cognitive empathy, which is the kind that I teach, is the practice of shifting your perspective. So curiosity and non-judgment that allow you to engage with another person's experience from their perspective rather than from your own. All of those kinds of empathy really point to the fact that we do all share a oneness of being that is extremely valuable to be in touch with. And so that's, one of the ways of getting in touch with it, I think.
You say empathy is a practice, not a feeling. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. I've heard a lot of times folks saying that I feel empathy as if it were its own emotion. Like I feel happy or I feel sad or I feel angry. And empathy isn't an emotion. Empathy is an experience. Like as a feeling, it's an experience, but to feel empathy with you, particularly maybe somatic empathy, I might feel angry. I might feel like I'm grieving. And that's, those emotions can have a lot of different flavors. So I tend not to think of it as an emotion, but as a practice of intentionally getting in touch with what's going on with you. And that practice helps me also to kind of step outside the squishiness of it. A lot of times too in my work that people struggle to connect with empathy because they don't feel like they're particularly warm and fuzzy. And empathy is still available to those people. So I want to invite people in the way that they can come in. And for some folks, that cognitive empathy practice might be the only starting point for a lot of reasons. One, maybe some emotional blocks on their part. Two, neurodiverse brains sometimes don't have that access to, reading facial expressions and feeling and reading those emotions. And so, having a way in for absolutely anyone to, actually follow these steps and learn these practices and kind of build this skill, build these brain muscles, makes it a lot more accessible.
It's so interesting to me because I remember once reading somewhere that empathy is one of those things that either you learn really young or you don't. Like either you have it if you learned it really young or you don't have it. But just like talking to you, it makes me think like, no, even if you didn't learn it at a really young age, you could still learn it as an adult. How would you go about learning empathy?
Yeah, well, just to go back to having it or you don't, that's not a growth mindset, right? It's like that kind of, I don't have that, so I'm not going to have that, is, it's not a helpful place to be. So, and it may feel that way. There was a time in my life that I thought that some people could sing and some people couldn't sing, and there was just no getting around that. But I now know that people who can't sing can be taught to sing. But it's a practice, right? It's like, first they need to be taught to hear the difference between pitches, and then to match those pitches, and then to understand how their breath works and how their vocal cords work. And so once those little baby steps kind of compound on one another, and it might take a long time, that can be learned. And it's the same with empathy. So it's starting from the very beginning, with someone who maybe didn't have access to empathic people in their lives or didn't have access to their own experiences of empathy in a safe way, may not feel that's available to them. But starting back with, what would be the equivalent of matching pitch is just kind of observing one's own experience. Self-witnessing is a huge part of empathy, which is kind of a paradox. But we think about empathy in terms of like focusing on another person. But I can only know you as deeply as I've known myself. And it's really cool because you can kind of do it in both directions. So that first step is like, how do I feel today? What's going on with me? And really knowing where it's coming from, that takes a lot of time. But once I have a little bit of, I kind of think of it sometimes like a box of crayons. So, first you're starting with an 8 box, right? And you want to get up to that 264 box. but like folks that are working with an 8 box, that's all they've got. It's just like, these are the colors that I'm working with. So that's what I can understand about you. And I'm going to drop those things into the things that are similar for me. But then as you practice, you start to have a broader vocabulary of experiences and emotion and complexity and all those kinds of things. And that self-knowledge is really painful. It's really painful if it's coupled with judgment, which it almost always is at first. And so the path toward understanding, for me, has to begin with practicing non-judgment, which can look like self-compassion. Sometimes it can look like just trying to be neutral. But however it looks, we won't see ourselves until we've removed that judgment. Anything that we refuse to look at, refuse to accept, is going to be a blind spot or a focal point in the way that we see others. In order for me to be able to see and receive you as you are, I have to see and receive myself as I am. And it's funny because in my TED Talk, I talk about that there isn't actually an order of operations. You can do one first or the other first. And I meant that. But there is a kind of way that the work I do with myself is what's going to expand the work that I'm doing with other people all the time.
Yeah. I'm sure for a lot of people that feels very daunting.
Yeah.
Because you might see things that you don't want to see.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot of gremlins in there.
There's a lot of gremlins. Huh.
Yeah.
There's an overwhelm that comes with like kind of self-reflection and kind of looking at yourself. And I wonder if that becomes like an obstacle to becoming a more empathetic person. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a one-to-one relationship. And then ironically, it also helps me when I experience a lack of empathy from someone. My first thought is, oh, that person really hates themselves. Like that person is in pain. That person can't look at things, and it helps me to soften and realize it's not really about me. But yeah,
I feel that way a lot right now with the way the world is. People not having empathy towards the other.
Yeah.
Does listening to others help us listen to ourselves? And how is that?
Yeah, for sure. You have to know yourself before you can know another person. It can work the other way, which is how it did for me. When I was an ethnographer, my job was to interview people and listen to them, receive them as they are. And when I started to find it difficult, when I started to have to, receive and accept and be curious about people that I actually didn't want to spend any time with at all, I had to kind of find a way. And when I started to really work with that non-judgmental curiosity, I had such a profound experience of unconditional love that it actually changed my life. Because then I could begin to know what it might feel like for me. And if all that other person's army of gremlins are okay, maybe mine are too. And so it started to kind of, both practices started to inform one another. And that practice of listening, it goes both ways, but also when we're listening to other people, we can get inspired because there's a side effect of really falling in love with everyone, which is kind of nice. But I found myself loving things about people that I have definitely not loved about myself and saying, hey, if it's okay for her, don't you think it's okay for you?
Can you give us an example?
Well, the thing that comes to mind is just like a fear and insecurity. And, when I'm looking at someone with non-judgment and I can see maybe that person's behavior is a little, it appears to be selfish or even arrogant, but I can see that it's actually just a deep insecurity and a deep fear underneath. And so I'm able to kind of show that person some compassion or show that person some non-judgment, that then when I find myself behaving that way, I think, yeah, you too, you're scared too, and you're insecure too. And you sometimes make choices that are a little cringy as well. And it's all right. It's all right. It has to be, or it's unbearable. Yeah.
How can we be better at like shifting our perspective and seeing another's point of view? Like the world right now seems so divisive, right?
Yeah.
Like I've never witnessed a world so divided.
Yeah.
Can we have empathy towards somebody that feels so different than us or so on the other side, supposedly,
Yeah.
Can we see what they see? Can we have compassion and empathy for them?
I had a beautiful and humbling experience with my brother that helped me a lot. I'm from the rural South, and a lot of my family comes from conservative and religious sort of culture. I don't share those viewpoints. Some of them adamantly not. And but I love my brother. I'm really close to my brother. And then, a couple of years ago when political America, I don't even know how to say, just went absolutely bananas, I was surprised to find that he was on a side and rooting for a guy. And it really surprised me because I was like, my brother's a smart person. He's a kind person. He's a he's a reasonable person. And so I didn't understand it. And he and I actually had a political argument that went the way that lots of them do and ended up being really heated and ugly and emotional, and we didn't talk after that for a few months. It may have even been like a year and a half.
Oh my goodness.
Which was, and it wasn't because we were mad at each other, it's because we didn't want to talk about it, and we didn't want to not talk about it. It kind of, it came between us. It came between us in a way that was super tough. And then I don't remember what exactly broke the silence, and it wasn't completely silent, but it was, distant. But when we started to talk again, he said to me, he's like, what really hurt me that you didn't respect my point of view. And I said, I don't respect your point of view, but I do respect you. And so let's see if I can start by separating those things. Like, I can't get behind the way that you're thinking right now, but I love you, and I trust that I love you for reasons that are still true. So why don't I want to show you the respect of telling me, why do you like this guy? And he explained to me that to him, American politics have been elitist and exclusive and also incredibly corrupt for so long. And a lot of the rural South felt left out of it or talked down to. And then finally there was this guy who was breaking all the rules, speaking in language that was really unpretentious, to use a non-judgmental word. And he was like, I like him because I can tell that he's not a part of politics as usual. And I was like, that's very interesting, because that is why I like who I like. And I realized that we actually shared a value, but we went different ways with it because we got different information, we lived in different cultures, and we had different people around us. And so then I was able to completely drop. I didn't feel like we were in disagreement anymore. We still don't vote alike, but I had to separate the person from the position, His position is not who he is any more than mine is. And I can respect him and I can love him and I can show him, dignity, while also feeling like, well, I think the place where you took that idea doesn't really work, but I'm not here to fight about that.
It's so interesting because as you talk, I think about there's obviously having such different points of views from somebody is one thing, but then what if we go beyond that, there's some people that really don't see other people, don't think other people have a right to exist, have a hand in oppressing other people.
Yeah.
How does that work? Because that's super interesting to me. How do you actually be able to see the humanity or the empathy for somebody who actually does not want you to exist?
Yeah, that's the ninja level. That's the ninja level practice right there. It's really real. And it's so hard, and this isn't the question you asked, but it's a little bit of the question you asked, is how do you forgive the unforgivable? And forgiveness is a tricky and loaded word, and I don't necessarily want to make that what I'm talking about, but I've had an experience of forgiving the unforgivable that maybe I'll share with you. But for me, what helps is to remember that just like my brother actually had a real and pretty valid point of view on his decision to vote the way he was voting, everyone, for the most part, believes they're doing the right thing, which is crazy. But I really do believe, and this is just a belief, I believe that malice is rare. And I believe that even these acts which are undeniably worthy of condemnation, even those acts are done with a very fervent and passionate belief that they are the right thing to do for reasons I may or may not understand. But that helps me to get over the paralysis of just being dumbfounded by what appears to be evil.
Yeah, it's just so hard because if somebody's truly racist and is harming another, how do you find that empathy,
The way that I do it is by recognizing that everyone that is alive is worthy of life. And I believe that everyone and everything that is worthy of life is worthy of love. And separating the behavior from the person, condemning behavior, stopping certain things from happening is important. But if we make it about that person, then we become that same, hateful racist. And so it's not easy, but I have, in my experience, when I've had those moments of expansion, it does feel easy in a weird way, that when your perspective really does expand to this level of understanding of oneness and of unconditional worthiness, then the love is just there. And that's a really interesting thing about love that I believe, is that we don't have to try to do it. We're made out of it. What we have to do is remove the obstacles. And once we remove those obstacles, it's there, and it's like it's flooding. We don't have to try to be good. We just have to remove those obstacles.
Get in the way. Yeah.
Yes. I kind of think about good and evil the way that, like heat and cold and light and darkness. Cold and darkness don't exist. They're absences. Only heat and light exist. I think good is the same. Good exists. I don't think evil is a force. I think it's an absence. And it's an absence of empathy.
And love and...
Yeah, but the love is there when we get those obstacles out of the way.
Yeah. Somebody once told me, because I was trying to get my head around something, and somebody said, if you grew up in that culture, in that environment, with those parents, in that kind of, you would have become that person too.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first time that it really reframed something for me, like, it's like we are byproducts of everything that we are exposed to. And some people are just exposed to maybe racist or, hateful ways of being in the world,
Yeah.
So they're like a product of all of that. And that's how they end up that way. And that kind of softened things for me a little bit,
And belief is really powerful in a way that I don't always think is good. Or rather useful. I try really hard not to evaluate things in terms of good and bad or right and wrong, but in terms of usefulness. Is it helpful? Is it not helpful toward a certain end? And I think that believing is so crazy. Someone asked me this week to describe, because my name is Faith, what faith means to me. And I got really squirmy because, well, I hadn't been asked that before, and I have strong feelings about it. I was raised in evangelical Christianity, where I was taught that the definition of faith was the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. I hate that definition because it was used as an excuse to say, because I believe this is right, it is right, no matter what anybody says or no whatever, And that does not work for me. One really powerful thing about the truth is that it doesn't need you to believe in it. It's going to be true no matter what. And so my faith is that I trust that truth will come if I continue to practice deep honesty, courageous honesty. If I ask myself, are you willing to let go of what you think you know? And when I become willing, the truth comes. That's what I believe in. I don't believe in a credo that I protect. The truth doesn't need protection.
I love that. It's hard for some people to see the truth or be open to seeing the truth because it sometimes feels safer to stay in the whatever narrative, whatever story you've been told, right?
Yeah.
You feel like maybe you'll stop belonging to a certain group of people.
Yeah.
You'll be the outcast. There's a lot of things that go into that, especially when you're kind of raised within a certain environment. I'm sure, you can relate to that. Yeah, it's fascinating. How does empathy help us feel better about ourselves?
In my own story, I found it easier to practice non-judgment with other people first. And for me, it happened because I really enjoyed practicing it. And as an ethnographer, it was my job to see and understand a lot of different people. I mean, hundreds. I've done hundreds of interviews and observations of people that are very different from myself. And it especially is easy to practice non-judgment with people that are super different because they're totally unknown. I don't have baggage about them necessarily, maybe. But I started to meet people that I did feel in common with. And so that helped me, as I was working on understanding them and receiving them as they are. It just gave me the skills and the ability to see, and there's this the little voice that I have that's like, you're the same. That's the same as you. And that became a little easier. Because of the way that I grew up, there's a very strong value of being selfless and not being selfish and putting other people first as a kind of
virtue.
Yeah, like a virtue. But yeah, self-care, self-priority was suppressed. And so it didn't feel good, to do this. When I was hearing about this self-love from people, I'm like, that's really uncomfortable. That's distasteful, or that's like not good behavior to say, I really love and care for myself and I prioritize myself. And but it was easy to do with other people for that reason. And it made me feel good. I felt like, I'm doing something that's honorable. But then it became painfully obvious that I also deserve that from me. I am also worthy of that same non-judgment and care and nurturing. Why not?
Why not? What role does acceptance play in the healing journey?
Oh, almost everything, right? It's a very big part of the practice of honesty. I've been thinking about honesty lately. What is honesty really? And I believe that honesty is the intention to know the truth. It is not related to the intention to tell the truth. That's a different practice. And whether or not I tell anyone what I know is another story. But honesty for me is removing those obstacles. Am I willing to let go of what I think I know? And then when I do see something that might be pretty gnarly, am I willing to accept it? Because if I don't, we're back to square one. And this is refusal to accept what is plainly true is one of the most toxic traits I have encountered in myself and in other people. It is so damaging. It's so damaging. It hurts so many people. I had a very, particularly the religious and family environment that I grew up in was very much, there were a whole slew of things that were just denied. Absolutely denied. They had no tools to accept it. And it wasn't that they wanted to lie to themselves. It was that they were presented with things that they're just like, I have no place to put this. I can't receive this. It doesn't fit into my world. And so I'm just going to build a wall, and I don't see that anymore. And that hurts people. Everyone. It hurts everyone.
Of course it does.
Yeah. And it happens in the conflicts we were talking about with this lack of empathy. There's an impossibility of receiving the reality of even your own actions. The reality of like understanding that perhaps I have done something that has been incredibly harmful to someone else. And I didn't want to, and I don't want that to be true. And so then I go, well, then it's not, then I didn't. It's like, or I had to, because I had to, that was my only choice. Because there's this impossibility of giving oneself the love and grace to say, I have made a terrible mistake. Yeah.
Makes me very emotional.
Me too.
You mentioned in your TED Talk how to talk to the worst parts of yourself. That you've tried so many different modalities and ways to cope with uncomfortable feelings. Can you tell us a little bit about your own healing journey and the voices and parts of yourself that you were trying to quell?
Yeah. I have tried a lot of different modalities, and a lot of them are really fun, and I think that they all gave me some value. But the one that I'm really into right now is shadow work, which is so special because it's all about acknowledging the suppressed or denied or, the parts that I may be ashamed of, and connecting with them and making amends with them for shutting them out and asking them for their guidance and advice and wisdom because they have some. It's not always advice I want to take, but it's interesting to know that it's in there, and it's also for me, that work is so much a part of acceptance, right? Because it's me saying, my public facing Karen Faith is a nice person, but I'm not always a nice person. And I've got parts of me that are, pretty interesting. and they're here, they're here with me. But shadow work is this really great practice of kind of, it's kind of part meditation, part visualization, but sort of getting into a quiet space of introspection where I ask them, what's up with them and what they need, how they're feeling, what I'm doing or not doing that they'd like to change, and accepting what I find. And it's so incredibly healing because it's very humbling, first of all. I don't get to consider myself this, beautiful, healed, compassionate person that I want everyone to think I am. I have to be honest about the fact that I am as real and vulgar a person as everyone else. And that I do sometimes have really selfish urges, or I do sometimes not care about others. And if I can acknowledge that, then I can address it. Oh, what is it like Fred Rogers used to say? If it's mentionable, it's manageable, which I really like. So if we can address it, talk to it, experience it, accept it, then there's a chance to kind of move through it. And a lot of these, particularly the kind of darker ones, the shame, the fear, the rage, when I do connect with them, they chill out. And then I can tell them, okay, well, I get it, but we're not going to do that. And they're like, okay, well, thanks for hearing me out. And that's that's not always that simple, but that's pretty much how it goes. But that practice has done more for me than a lot of other ones. I wouldn't say like it's the best one or this is the only one you need, because I actually think I needed to do all those other ones first. I think, we start where we are. And, I was asked a little earlier about when my healing journey started, and I really do think it started when I just had really, 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 really bad headaches, debilitating headaches. Just couldn't
function.
Yeah. Sometimes for weeks at a time. And I was being given prescription pain meds, and I was like, I can't live like this. I was 22, and I'd been on pain meds since I was 16, and I knew that it was unsustainable. And I was also still in pain all the time, and I didn't know why. And I started to read about creating a dialogue with the pain, which is very similar to what I'm doing now, actually, now that I think about it. But the first thing that I needed to do, well, I don't know if it was the first, was to separate pain from suffering, and to understand that the sensation of pain doesn't have to be the experience of suffering. If I'm curious about it, and I can kind of go, where do I feel it? How big is it? What shape is it? What color is it? Does it have a texture? Does it have a temperature? And once I was curious about it, then I kind of stepped away from the story of my body hates me, my body's trying to kill me, which was the suffering. And it was like, what's wrong with me? This is going to be like this forever. I deserve this. I'm messed up. Like all this story that came with the pain, I didn't even realize I was doing that. Because, it was just like the pain was, capitulating into this misery. And so when I first started to just examine it, dialogue with it, and then I started to practice yoga to help with the connection between my mind and body, and understanding that these things are inseparable in spite of the fact that we continually separate them. I was a yoga teacher also for 20 years. And so I often taught my students that doing yoga sometimes will kind of take you through the back door of your emotional life. Like if you can't go in the front door, you can kind of go in another way and work through it that way. And when I started to practice that really did open things up for me.
I know for me, there's something that yoga unlocks. Like there's a lot of people kind of, the healing journey starts when you start like being able to move energy through the body.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Versus, I used to get debilitating migraines too. And it's like you realize that it's a lot of stuck energy that has nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. And how do you move that?
And discovering that the metaphor of the body is so exact. Like there's a precision that is so beautiful that everything that I started to learn about my body, it felt like it was always a parallel to what I needed. You get what you need on the step that you're on. And that first thing, I just needed pain relief. And then I started to uncover some more dimensionality around that pain experience. And then start, and so the modalities that I needed changed over time until they kind of evolved into the place that they are now, which is, a kind of a salad of different things.
I'm going to ask you about different modalities that you've used. So I often think that the war on the outside is often started on the inside, that we are actually like oftentimes at war with ourselves.
Yeah.
And that radiates out into the current world we see right now. How do we start to heal parts of ourselves we are at war with?
A long time ago, there's this thing on the internet called the Scale of the Universe tool. It's really old. It's like needs an Adobe Flash plugin and everything. You can
Flash, remember that?
Yeah. You can kind of zoom in and out, and it shows the size of everything in the known universe at scale to one another. The tiniest thing to the largest thing. It's so mind-bending. It's really worth just like, it has a slider, and you can go through them and see their relationship to one another.
I'd love to check that out.
Yeah, it's like a really cool perspective-making thing, but the bananas thing about it to me is that the size of a human being is almost exactly in the middle. And that could be because we're the ones doing the measuring, but but when I saw that, I realized that all of my life, in every spiritual tradition that I'd been a part of, I'd always been encouraged to think about the big side of the scale and how small I am compared to how big the universe is. And I was like, wait a minute. To everything on the left side, I'm a god. I am...
Or goddess.
Yeah. Gender neutral deity. And I am just like, I contain trillions of life forms in here that I am fairly in charge of managing, though I am not in charge of all of it. Some of them have their own rebellions, right? And when I started to think about, as a practice, thinking about myself as the ruler of this universe, understanding that I have committed genocide to some of these tiny beings. I have taken antibiotics. I have done all kinds of things. Like in a very tiny scale, I have done these horrible acts of violence. I have poisoned myself for fun more times than I can count. I have flatly cut off parts of my body for style reasons. Like I'm just like, oh my gosh, I am not a very good God. I am not very good. I am unreasonable, chaotic, and extremely shallow at times, or self-serving to all of these creatures in here. And that, just perspective-wise, helped me realize that I too have started quite a few wars in my own body, in my mind for sure. But I have actually intentionally done damage and refused to listen to the call to be better to myself at times, when I know that what I need is water, but what I want is wine. When I know that what I need is good food, but then instead, I'm eating junk food or whatever it is. I've done this. And it's, it's forgivable, but it helps me to understand that this war inside the body is a place where I can have impact that is so much stronger than the impact that I have or don't have on the wars on that right side of the scale. I do believe that, small things branch outward. I don't think that my, sleeping well and eating well is going to help all the horrors of the world, but it helps this universe. And in my relationships with others, you're the ruler of your world, I'm the ruler of mine, but I don't necessarily know your culture or speak your language. We need translators. We need to take time to understand. We need to have diplomatic and respectful debates with one another about what is it like in the universe that you're in charge of? Do you need any help? What's going on? And that's where, we can actually help each other. It's like, you've got a war with your gut biome right now. I discovered that eating this helps, like whatever it is. I've been here before. Where, what do you need? What can I offer you? And there's a real beauty about giving each other that kind of honor and understanding that we're not just equals. We're also rulers. We're also very powerful, sovereign beings. That gives us so much more of a bond. The power and the humility of that. And both are necessary.
Yeah. I want to go to your healing journey and how all these things that we've talked about have helped you on your journey. Can you share a little bit about that?
I want to tell you about how the practice of speaking with some of my interior voices became very, very powerfully transformative for me. But in order to tell you that, I need to tell you what it was I was contending with. I don't like to share the details of trauma for a couple of reasons. And one is that it's hard. It's hard to say and it's hard to listen to. But another reason is that it often kind of prompts comparison, and I don't think that's useful. But I want to encourage us not to focus on the event of that, if that's okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
My particular story begins when I was born. My father was the pastor and director of a Christian kind of rehab for teenage boys, and it was not quite a detention center, but like
Rehab, like in what capacity?
Behavioral.
Oh.
And so teenage boys who had been sometimes convicted of crimes, or sometimes were just behaviorally difficult to manage, lived in this home. It was called Happy Landings, and which is sad. But and I think there were probably 12 or 20, that size group that lived in this dormitory, and there was a chapel, and then there was a house, and this campus is where I grew up. One of those boys was sexually abusive to me from the time that I was 3 years old. And I remember it with a lot of clarity, with a lot of detail. It was severe and ongoing. I was such a little girl that I perceived him as being an adult. So in my memories, this was a grown man doing these things. And as I grew up and as I learned about sexual abuse, it was too late. It was too late. So when I started to hear about, you don't want to make sure you don't do this because this thing might happen, I knew it had already happened. And then people started to talk about it like the worst thing in the world. It was the worst thing that could possibly happen. And that these people who did that stuff were the worst people, unforgivable people. And yeah, everybody hates child molesters, right? Like everybody, I have heard a lot of people have revenge fantasies about all the ways that they should be punished and tortured and all these things. And I've participated in some of that myself. But I carried the story that this grown man had hurt me and violated me and disgraced me and stolen from me, and that he was the worst human being for doing that to such a little girl. And I carried this in my heart for a long time. As you can imagine, because of that, a lot of things unfolded for me. That I had a long history of sexual abuse, recurrent in my family, and then as I left home, there was so much of it that it was really overwhelming. And I often pointed to that incident as being a kind of like imprint, that it was like, it started so early that it was just going to be my life. It was just going to be how my life is. And I didn't want to live that life. I didn't think that I could endure it. And I didn't think it was worth it. And I didn't think I could ever heal. Much later, 40 years later, which was actually only 3 years ago. I'm writing a book. I mean, I hope I am still writing this book, but I'm writing a book and I got a little stuck. So I decided to do one of these shadow exercises. And I sort of I called up this part of myself who fell in love with writing when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And she's really cool and funny. And I asked her, what would you like for us to write about? And in my mind's eye, and this is very difficult to describe, but it was so clear to me, in my mind's eye, she stood up and looked at me and said, find out what happened at the boys' home. And first of all, didn't want to write about that. Secondly, I know what happened at the boys' home. I've never forgotten what happened at the boys' home. And so she said, not what happened to you, what happened there. Which was very interesting because I had never thought about what happened there. I had only ever thought about what happened to me. But I was so shaken by this that I'd stopped the meditation and I got on the internet and I started doing some research and I started trying to find out. And I looked up happy landings and I looked up, and it was really, because all of that was pre-internet, it was really hard to find anything. And I looked and looked and looked and looked until I finally found some newspaper articles about the boys' home, Happy Landings, in Melbourne, Florida, and found that the boys had publicly accused my parents of abuse, which was, I didn't know that. I also saw some articles, asking for funding for the boys' home and different things. And, I'd kind of been told that it was like a Christian sort of juvenile detention. But I also remember that we had some government sponsorship, and I was like, how does that work? I'm not really sure. And so I looked into it and I realized that this was not a juvenile detention. It was a foster home. My parents were fostering boys who had been abused and were also abusing them. Which meant that this evil man, was actually a 15-year-old boy who was himself an abuse survivor, who shared an abuser with me, and who was my brother. Oof. He was my foster brother. And when I learned all of those things, all of my anger disappeared. All of it. All of my resentment disappeared. All of my hatred, all of my sense that this evil thing had happened, I realized he was a kid. And I have no idea what he went through before he got there. But he didn't have any tools either. And he didn't know what he was doing, probably. And pardon the detail, but I actually remember one time saying, ouch, and him saying, oh, sorry. He didn't want to hurt me. It wasn't malicious. It undoubtedly changed the course of my life, and that impact is very real. And my release of the anger doesn't change that a lot. It doesn't change the past, but it does change the moment that I'm in. It changes who I am today. It changes the way that I look at other situations when I feel hurt, when I feel victimized, when I feel enraged, when I feel judgmental. And I have to say, I don't know. I don't know where that person is. I don't know who that person is. I don't know where they've been or where they're going. But I know that they might be my brother or my sister in some kind of way. And if I can find that way, if I can find the way that we're the same, I can let go.
Thanks for sharing that. It's very powerful.
It's been really cool for me. And I'm so grateful to this little girl inside of me that pointed me in that direction. How did she know? How did she know? It gets a little spooky then. But
Oh, me.
well, I mean, no, I just mean like it's just spooky. Like the interior people that I talk to, they know things that I don't know.
But we know
How?
everything on a visceral level. We know because our bodies are so wise.
No, it's amazing.
We just don't give them that, our bodies are incredibly wise.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about a time that you got some wisdom that you didn't know that you knew?
Oh my goodness. So I grew up in wars, and I think that the vibration of war, and this was shared with me from a teacher where I don't even remember when this was, maybe 15 years ago. She said something to me like, the war ended on the outside, but the war is still inside of you. And I remember when she said that, it was such a big kind of epiphany for me to realize how I was doing so many things in my life, like the way I worked or the way I just did anything, still had that vibration of war, the way I partied, the way, just all the things. I had an epiphany probably about 2 years ago where I realized that I was attracted to a certain career because it replicated the vibration of war. Because the career I got attracted to, we talked about dividing and conquering. We talked about killing it. We talked about going to the war room. We talked about going to the bunker. We worked ourselves to death.
Yeah.
We worked every weekend.
And that felt like home to you.
And that felt like home. So that was a big epiphany for me that, wow, that expression, like, wherever you go, there you are. That was kind of a big revelation that, like, it was during one of, like, a healing practice that I was doing, and it just kind of dawned on me that I had been doing life as if the war was still happening. Because it felt so comfortable. That's what I knew.
So is this your peacemaking practice?
Oh, I've learned how to be so kind to myself, for sure. For sure. I've learned to nourish myself. I've learned to not eat terrible food. I've really learned how to be kind to myself. And it's been a practice, it's taken me 10 years to get there, to really treat my body in a kind, nurturing way and prioritize that,
I discovered at some point that I was treating my body with vengeance. I was angry for having a body. I felt like my body had caused all these problems, and I was trying to destroy it, which is a pretty big thing to realize. But it helps me now to kind of be, to be gentler and to realize, oh, come on, this is the world that we live in.
Totally, it is our home.
It's our home.
It's our home, and I'll say, I have these little kids, and I always say, the more we take care of our bodies, the more our bodies will take care of us. And I wish I had learned that early on,
Yeah.
I think as women also, we have a whole host of other things where there's certain ideals and there's certain things, diet culture. That's totally oppressing your body.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right, so there's a whole list of stuff, looking a certain way, doing certain things. We're totally part of oppressing ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge. This is like huge.
In February, I spoke at a mental health conference. That was a really special conference, specifically for people who experience dissociation and dissociative identity disorder. And I was pretty nervous to talk to that group of people because I hadn't really identified with that diagnosis, certainly not publicly, but even so, they invited me to come, and I did, and I shared my story, and I shared more of my story than I've ever shared publicly, in a lot of detail about a lot of the things that happened. And in my particular story, there was, quite a lot of sexual abuse, but also a lot of that abuse was covered by the church, which is another layer of, as you can imagine. But I started to talk about, my experiences, and, this room of 400 people, and it was just nodding heads. And I was like, you guys too? Everybody? And then I started to ask for hand raises because I was like, this is a little too much. I'm like, so who else got demons cast out of them? And I'm like, kind of a lot. Who else? And so one of the things that I discovered when I walked into the conference, they had what was called a grounding room. They'd turn a whole conference room. It was low stim, low lights, blankets, soft pillows on the floor, some fidgety stuff, stuffed animals, different things. And it was such a heaven for me. I'm a person that is very easily overstimulated. My senses are too sensitive a lot of the time. I mean, in the airport, I'm like in sunglasses and earplugs. I can't, it's just so much. And when I saw this grounding room, I was like, is that part of it? And so I asked them I was like, the sensory stuff is part of it? They're like, yep. And it was like this beautiful moment of like, oh my God, these are my people. I do belong with this group of people. And speaking with one of the board of directors of that group, who's a doctor of psychology, and I was asking her, I was like, I think I'm noticing that this experience, I'm like, is it specific to sexual abuse? Because it wasn't, I'm like, there are a lot of different kinds of abuse, but not a lot of them that immediately call this particular mechanism forward in the mind. And not only was it a lot of sexual abuse, but a lot of sexual abuse covered by the church, which is something I thought was just like a weird, unique aspect of my story. And I was like, oh no, it's actually a big part of this, because violence is a little clearer. You know what's happening. The conflict is out in the open. Sexual abuse is very confusing.
Because it's hidden.
Yeah, and then partnered with, get Jesus involved, and now we're very confused. And so it's very confusing, and the mind just does all these acrobatics to try to sort things and put them in different places and block this stuff out and put these things over here. And it's very extreme. It's a really, really difficult thing to process. And I'll just add to that, this isn't really what I was trying to say, but I think it's very interesting. She told me, well, yes, usually sexual abuse and neglect. And I was like, oof. So doing nothing is as bad as doing the worst? Whoa. That was huge, too, to recognize that just leaving a child and not giving it what it needs causes that same kind of spin out and confusion and loneliness and isolation and splintering that, severely wounding what I would consider to be one of the most intimate and sacred parts of a person. I wouldn't have thought, but pretty interesting. The sensory aspect was a beautiful discovery for me to make, that it was another way that my body had adapted to abuse, was becoming extremely hyper-aware of what's happening in the body. And even though that's a kind of problem for me, I started to see it. I was like, oh, this is a beautiful gift that my body has given me, that I have to protect, and that I should keep and use for
when you need it.
Yeah, when I need it. But the experience of dissociation, which is, again, a protective experience, right? It's a really beautiful thing that my mind has done to help me process and survive and move forward.
Of course. I mean, in the wild, an animal plays dead so they don't get eaten.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. a big part of, addressing it and healing it is addressing, finding all those parts and befriending them again and letting them speak and letting them come out. And that can be really challenging. Some of the parts are, or some of the parts are pre-verbal. Some of the parts are, children that have experiences that children shouldn't have, and they have things to say. They have things they need to do. They have burdens to release. There are a lot of really great therapies. The most well-known was developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz, called internal family systems therapy. And it's so funny because in my TED Talk, when I talk about speaking to myself, at the time that I gave that talk, I was not aware of IFS and had kind of come to the practice on my own, more or less. About, I don't know, probably 300 of the 1,000 YouTube comments are people telling me, this is IFS, right? Like this, and
funny.
It's really funny. And then Dr. Schwartz reached out to me. Oh. He emailed me about a year ago and said someone had sent him my talk, and he was so interested in knowing how I came to discover what he also came to discover. And I was afraid it was going to be like a IP conversation, and it wasn't. He had no ownership over it. He wanted to reach out to me because he said he discovered internal family systems by just listening to his clients. He's like, I didn't invent this. They told me about their parts. I just helped, I just made just kind of structured it. But I told him about my story, and he was like, wow, this is uncanny. And I had discovered so many of the same things about what he calls the capital S self, which is the sort of the most essential, I would say, spiritual self that isn't splintered. That in my own practice I call right now, Karen. This is the right, because that person only exists in the very present moment. That person isn't connected to past events, which is why she's really cool and free, and she sees with clarity. She has access to my memories, but she has wisdom, and and she's able to be in the moment without all the baggage of the past. And he had identified all these qualities of that part, and I identified some similar qualities. It was so cool to talk to him. So that practice of dialoguing with those parts, finding out what they all need. Many of them have been neglected by me for a long time and need to be heard or need to have outlets for their own healing. For dissociative identity, some people find that it's helpful for them to be able to live kind of out in the open with all of their parts sort of interfacing with the world in a way that's kind of free and uncloseted, while other people do that work internally and let their public-facing self handle all of that stuff. And that's a little bit more of where I am with it. When we don't do the work of connecting with them, however, when we don't allow them their time to play or to speak or to get their needs met, they do something that, is referred to in different ways, but it's basically kind of, they take over. They take the wheel. That can go really badly. And I've experienced it. I've gotten in some trouble, ruined some relationships, burned some bridges, and it happens. And it actually happens even if you don't have the disorder. The shadow work group that I work with, they talk about this all the time. If you constantly suppress your rage, it will. It'll find a way,
and then it'll implode.
Yeah, totally.
Of course.
So that work of giving them some time and some voice so that there aren't those involuntary takeovers, that's a huge part of it. And I haven't experienced, but I've heard that some people in doing this work experience reintegration, where they all come together again. Seems neato, but it's also not always a goal. Sometimes it's just kind of living
with all the parts.
Yeah.
Just a multidimensional being.
There's a lot of us. We got a lot of things to say.
What kind of different modalities have you tried, and what has worked for you?
So fun. Well, I started with yoga and other kinds of kind of, martial arty stuff in that world. But yoga, I kept coming back to that because that was what was really helpful to me. But when I became a yoga teacher and I was working in yoga studios, I started to have access to a lot of different kinds of body work. And so practicing with body workers was super helpful for me. I think because, first of all, non-sexual touch, I mean, I hadn't had any. And it was kind of amazing for me to experience like a caring, nurturing touch that wasn't trying to take anything from me. That was itself so powerful. And then all the different things that can happen in that too. And acupuncture, which then introduced me to the idea of that there are energy channels that it made me feel pure magic. I was like, I am a magic person with invisible magical powers that you can just... I had some very gentle treatments and I'm like, I'm not really sure if I felt anything. And then one time, I can't remember the name of this thing. It was 5 or maybe 6 needles right in the crown of the head. And I felt an electric jolt. And I was like, oh my God, this is no joke. Like something's happening here that I don't understand. So that was really special because it also alerted me to the fact that there's more to it than I know about. And there's power in it that is accessible if I access it.
What is unconditional welcome and how did you come about that practice?
Unconditional welcome is probably unconditional love, but I don't use the word love because it freaks people out. And I don't know why.
Funny that love freaks people
Isn't
out.
it crazy? I worked as an ethnographer, which is a special kind of immersive qualitative research where I'm in person with someone in the context of their life, trying to learn about them and know them as deeply as possible. And what's special about this kind of research is that it's really different than some other kinds of market research where I really just want to know what you think of our product. You know what I mean? I want to know what you fear and what you believe and what you value and, you know, what drives you to want to live or not want to live. Like, I want to know the deep stuff. And so I had a practice of going in really deep with people. But in order to do that, they have to be comfortable and safe. And so I've got to sort of make myself into whoever it is that they would feel comfortable talking to, which is a very interesting practice that I was uniquely suited for due to having multiple personalities. But I encountered this when I was in the field working with people that I didn't always like. And sometimes that I actually sort of resented or definitely judged, but sort of felt repulsed by. And as a practitioner, I have to turn that off. It can't be a part of it at all. Because anything that I'm judging in you is clouding my view. Like, and then it's all covered, then I can't see you at all. So I can't, if I'm ignoring things or if I'm focusing on them, then I can't really see. So I have a practice of like opening myself, and it's not called love. It's just the practice of non-judgment. And non-judgment is not affection. It's not approval. It's not tolerance. It's just, I will allow everything that is to be. It's acceptance. Non-judgment is everything that you are is welcome here. And that is why I use the word welcome, because it's a little bit more than saying, I acknowledge you. That might be enough for some people as a researcher, but for me, in order to kind of break through my own judgment, it can't be just I acknowledge you, but you are welcome here. I am opening up to welcome you. And when I did that, I felt a channel open and a like limitless thing. It's like this, like a geyser. And I was also just like, whoa, what's happening? Like that acupuncture thing where I felt this thing kind of shoot up through my spine. And it was so powerful, so limitless that I really do feel like I had an experience of unconditional love, absolutely sacred, divine energy that was more than necessary for research, but then transformative as well. And not only could I see more of the person I was researching, but I could be more of myself. And it became this power that I looked forward to tapping into.
I love that. What's the difference between empathy and connection?
I think practicing empathy creates connection, but a person can feel connection without practicing empathy. And it might have something to do with the experience of sameness. So a lot of times when we talk about empathy, we think about like, oh, I've had the same feeling, like me too, been there before, I know the feeling. It's the experience of shared experience. It's just saying, oh yeah, I'm like you. And that can make a connection. People can feel that connection. And sometimes people feel connection without sameness, but the feeling of connection can be felt without any kind of practice, I think. But empathy, at least cognitive empathy, can be practiced with no connection and with no feeling. Cognitive empathy, that perspective taking, I can learn enough about you with curiosity and non-judgment that I can see your point of view, maybe even articulate it as well or better than you can, which is the goal, and still
Not have a connection with you.
yeah, I sometimes talk about, I had this experience watching like the Ted Bundy Netflix series where I thought, okay, I know more now. And also still, yeah, no. Like, not into it, don't get it, can't, but I do know more now. That practice is really valuable for people we don't feel connected to. But more often than not, there's a side effect of connection. That woman that I talked about in my TED Talk, I didn't want to connect with her at all. I just wanted to get the job done, and then I accidentally fell in love with her, which is a problem. Well, not always, but it can be.
Connection seems to be a thread when it comes to healing, having a connected experience. That's what humans crave and long for. How can we be better at connection?
Well, I think that there's a truth inside of that question. Wholeness is a thing. So similar to, my relationship with myself and the relationship to paradox, the relationship to the shadow, the idea that God might not be good, but God might be good and evil together. Like, this is about wholeness. And wholeness is the acknowledgement of the fullness of what is. I think this is essential to healing. And I've been leaning into this a lot in my work. And one thing in the Insight Generation workshop, where I'm teaching people to be observers and to gather insight from what they hear, is I've been talking about how if your insight doesn't contain a paradox, it is incomplete. And we want to aim for wholeness. Like, have you seen all of it? Have you acknowledged the opposite of it? I saw, because I looked at one of your interviews, that the work of Byron Katie was mentioned. I love that work so much, because that work is about acknowledging that all of the opposites have truth in them. All of them. And you get to choose. You get to choose which truth you want to live in. And taking responsibility for that choice is huge. But your question about connection, I think it's a reach toward wholeness. When we connect with someone else, I think we're reaching toward that sense of wholeness as the
glue or something.
Yeah, it seems a bit of a cliche, but we are one human body. We are at war, but we are one human body. And every time we connect with someone, we inch closer to wholeness. We inch closer to union. And I think that for me, that's the sacred calling us toward it, saying like, and
we're more alike than we are different. Yeah. Coming together. I love that. I think Gabor Mate talks a lot about wholeness too. Yeah. Sitting with ourselves and listening to our own mind is hard for many. What are some techniques to start doing that? And how do we start to befriend ourselves? What are some baby steps?
I love that question. When I first started to talk to my parts, let's call them, I was actually taught to do this by a bartender that I met on a Tinder date. Hey, it's part of it. It's the truth. His name is Jason, and I owe him a lot. He's still a very, very dear friend. And it's so funny. I actually love our story so much because we had matched on Tinder, and we had gone on a date. I think it was probably our third date, and I was wondering whether it was going to get sparkly. And he kind of said to me, I think I know the reason why we met. And I was like, oh, yeah? Please tell me. He said, I think I am supposed to teach you how to deal with your shame. And there was a part of me that was like, who the fuck do you think you are? And another part of me that was like, oh my God, if you can help me, please do. and I was like, okay, well, I mean,
I'm listening.
yeah, I'm listening. And it was just so bold and kind of like,
wow,
a little insulting. I was not talking about my shame or asking for help at the time. And I was like, what is going on? But then he's like, no. I see you doing some things in your brain that I do with mine. And I have a way to fix it. And I was like, well, then please share. And so he talked to me about this practice that he had developed in the shower of just asking, he calls them his people, how they're doing and what they need. And I immediately was like, I can't do that. You don't understand. It is extremely noisy. I'm spending all my time telling them to please shut up and leave me alone. It's like, that's not helpful. It's just as mean as it is if you were to do that to your friends or your team or whatever. Like to say, shut up and leave me alone isn't getting you anywhere. And so he said, you got to ask him to talk to you. And I was like, I can't, it's overwhelming. Everybody's just shouting at me. And he said, oh, that's easy. Just ask him to speak one at a time, which had never been an option in my mind that I could ask for a change and get it. And I mean, more on that later. But I was like, that's not going to work. I can't just ask my brain to do. And he's like, yeah, you can't. I promise you, try it. And so he told me to ask them to speak one at a time and to make their requests reasonable and to be honest, but also to be kind. And it worked. And he was a shower person. I'm a bathtub person. I do this in the bathtub. So I do this every morning in the bathtub. I check in with everybody, ask them how they're doing. If they're very noisy, I ask them to speak one at a time. I usually don't have to anymore. Now it's really different. So, they all line up. They know whose turn it is. And I ask them to make their requests reasonable. If they say really awful things, I question them on that, Byron Katie style, where I'm like, is that true? Is that true? Is it true that I'm the worst, most horrible person? No, it's not? Okay, then why are you talking to me like that? And then it's like, well, I kind of wish that you wouldn't have whatever it was mistake that I made. Like, yeah, I also wish I wouldn't have done that. But can I ask you to, give me a little mercy here? And they're like, yes, you can. Or I'll let them know, which I had to do today. I've got an interview today. Here's what I need you to do. This one needs to come forward. That one, I'm going to deal with you later. It's like, just get everybody organized.
Who are all these people?
We're fun. It's a party in here. But that practice, and then the most important part was that Jason told me, he said, so after you get done having your conversation, you have to thank them and tell them that you love them. And I said, I don't love them. He goes, I know. And they know too. He said, say it till you mean it. And I love them now. So thanks, Jason.
Best Tinder date ever.
Yeah, totally.
Oh boy. You just said something. You said asking for something and actually getting it. Tell me a bit more about that.
Well, have you always got all your needs met?
Nope.
I think especially as children, when our needs are not met or even listened to, we assume they never will be. We assume that if I can't give it to myself, no one else is going to give it to me. And sometimes it can result in a lot of different behaviors, manipulation or bulldozing or just going without. All kinds of things can happen, but I had never developed the skill to say, hey, this is what I want. Would you please give it to me? And having someone go, yes, here. Like that was totally wild in my interior and exterior life. So starting to do that with myself helped me. I had no ability to do it with other people before myself. And this one was definitely, I had to start internally first. But once I realized it's not mean or selfish to ask someone for something, and they can say no. As long as no is an okay and acceptable answer to me, that's nothing to fear in asking. And so it helped me not only to get what I needed from myself, but to manage expectations with other people as well. But I'll tell you, Jason taught me to do this, and it was a long time. It was 2 years of me doing this with myself. And I was practicing, but, things weren't totally sorted. And I went through a really intense period of suicidality about 2 years later. And it was truly debilitating. I don't remember what triggered it, but it kind of didn't matter because it was just the repetitive desire to get out of here. And I was so incapacitated by it because I kept just begging them to please stop saying that. Please stop saying that. Please take it easy on me. I was in a begging mode with them. And I actually I had moved away from Jason's in Kansas City. I was living in Chicago. I got on the train. I went to Kansas City, and I took Jason out to dinner, and I was like, what are we going to do about this? And he goes, oh, I forgot to tell you, you can make boundaries with them. And I was like, what? Another completely unfamiliar concept.
Wow.
And he's like, yeah, you keep asking them what they need, but you can also tell them what you need. And he was like, you just need to let them know that that's off the table. We're not doing that. And that you're going to take care of them, but they need to
Respect your boundaries. Yeah.
And I was just like, this isn't going to work either. I did not believe it was going to work. And it was probably 2 weeks later, I was back in Chicago, and I remember this moment. It was so powerful. And I was so depressed. And it was winter, it's February, it's very snowy and it's cold, and I was in bed. I was already in bed. And there was something in me, again, whatever interior wisdom just said, get up and go outside. And I don't want to go outside. It's snowing outside. It's bedtime. But it was just like, no, it's important. You get to get up and go outside right now. And I got up, I put my coat on, I went outside, I sit on the stoop, and it started. This is going. And then suddenly, I had this totally assertive voice, which is not a voice that I usually use, certainly not with them, and also not in the world at that time. And I said, listen, I need you to get on board with living. This is not on the table for discussion. I am going to take care of you. I promise you I will take care of you. But we are not committing suicide, so you can shut that down completely. And it was, what I heard first was, but I'm in a lot of pain. I was like, yeah, I get it. Don't worry about it. I got you. We're going to do all the stuff to manage that, but I need you to get on the bus. This train's rolling. It's a bus, it's a train, I don't know what it is. And everything changed. Like, that was actually a moment where the shape of that interior conversation completely changed. And it was no longer like me begging them to help me, but it was like, okay, this is what I need from you.
You took like radical responsibility,
yes.
basically.
And it is a dialogue, but I'm in charge of it. And that was important. A lot of them are younger, underdeveloped, and extremely wounded people. So no, they don't get to drive. You know?
I know there's a lot of them, but can you just name one or two just to get a sense of who they are?
Well, okay. So there's an angry teenager. All of mine are named Karen, by the way. Some people have different names for theirs. That hasn't been my experience. And also, I've felt like it's really important for me to acknowledge that they're all the real me. I don't like this conversation about who's the real you. They're all real. They're all me. They're all part of me. It's been helpful for me not to consider them as external to myself because that feels like they're invaders. So angry teenager Karen, though, I love her so much because she's not having it from anybody. She doesn't care who she offends. She's very strong. She knows what she knows. She believes what she believes. She'll fight to the death for it. And I have needed her. I have needed her. I spoke out about the abuse in my house when I was 15. I didn't know that it was abuse until I was 14. You know, you grow up in a thing, it just feels like it's normal.
That's what happens.
And I didn't fully understand that what was happening, and there was some dissociation involved as well. So a lot of the times the things that were happening I actually wouldn't remember the next day until they would happen again. And then in the moment I would be like, yeah, this happened before. And then I would forget again and I remember and it went on for 10 years. And when I was 15, it became apparent.
This was already happening for 10 years when you were 15.
Because, yeah, never mind the details of it, but when I told my mom about it, and I said, hey, listen, you need to know what's going on, because I thought she didn't know. Unfortunately, she did know. But she
knew.
Yeah. She couldn't process it. She couldn't. She saw it happen the week that she married my stepfather, and she told our pastor, and he told her to. And so a blind eye was turned. I mean, I think it was, she didn't have the capacity to acknowledge it. She didn't have the tools. She also had a horrific history herself and had shut all of that down. And to this day cannot acknowledge. But when I told her, her decision was to move us out of state, because she knew that I had talked to a teacher at school and they would be required to report it. So we left the state, and I was moved into my grandmother's house. At that time, this part of me was enraged. At first, I was asking for help. But when I didn't get it, and I was told that I was lying, and I was also told that until I admitted that I was lying, I would not have any privileges of even going outside of the house, making phone calls, anything. I had to admit that I had lied. And she was just like, well, then I'll sit in this room for the rest of my life, because I am never going to deny my own truth. Never. You can't take it from me. She was so strong, so strong. And I love her. I remember it. I love her for it so much that there was a just absolute refusal. Like, you can take anything from me, and I will not back down on this. Her conviction and her resolve and her knowledge, that her confidence and clarity that she knew absolutely what the truth was, and that she would not, absolutely no one would brainwash her out of it or torture her out of it or isolate her out of it. I was like, I don't have that today all the time. And so I ask her, I'm just like, girl, I need you. And she'll come in, she's just ready. She's guns blazing all the time. She's like, you know what's right? Fuck everybody. Like, it's a really, really great part of me to have. So that's one. And there's a younger one, this writer, who I asked for help with the writing, and she gave me a lot of wisdom. She's great because she...
This is 7-year-old?
Yeah, she wants to play. She's very creative, and she wants to play, and she's not afraid to fail. That's her superpower, is that she doesn't care if it turns out good. She just wants to explore. And she's very innovative, and she's really creative, and she's not perfectionistic. She's not worried that she's going to be embarrassed if it's not amazing. And I need her a lot because present day Karen is afraid of all those things. And so these two are kind of favorite companions because not being afraid to offend someone and not being afraid to fail are very, very important qualities that I have to conjure up.
I love that. I love those Karens.
Yes.
And this Karen.
Thank you. Can you relate to some parts of yourself
yeah.
like that too?
For sure. I mean, now I kind of want to do that for myself.
Yeah.
After this, I want to write down all the different Miras.
The versions of yourself. Yeah. It's also a very, in the DID community, there's a lot of art making and collage.
What's the DID?
A dissociative identity disorder.
Okay.
There's a lot of like collage art as a therapeutic practice because you can put all these different pictures of yourself in different situations or different outfits or different ages and see them together and just like kind of love this whole person that is you, which is, something that outside of that context I would have thought was like pretty vain. Like, I want to make a collage of all of my different faces. But, and that's why I think I heard you talking about the artist. I forgot her name now. This wonderful artist that did so many self-portraits.
Cindy Sherman?
Yes. Oh. I think, and I suspect that she may have been a system as well, but that she made herself into everything. Wonderful.
So we've mentioned love a few times in this conversation, and I just want to unpack a little bit love, especially that sometimes we hear about self-love, and to a lot of people it kind of goes over their head. They don't really understand what that means, and then people talk about being love or falling in love. Maybe can you unpack a little bit the relationship that we have to love?
I can try. What's really helped me in my own understanding of love is to distance it from some of the ways that we talk about love casually, which are usually, maybe more accurately described as adoration, affection, admiration, these kinds of ways that we place the focal point on a person or some attributes that we admire. And love is way more hardcore than that. In the way that I think about it, in the way that I try to practice it, it doesn't require me to admire you. It doesn't require me to adore you. I think about love as a kind of force of nature. And in fact, sometimes I think it may be synonymous to me with like the life force. That love is like truth, doesn't require me to believe in it or to do it or to make it. It requires me to get out of its way. It's already here. We're made out of it. It's this understanding of love that is pretty radical in that it can be sparked by anything. It can be received or given to anyone. The love that I'm interested in is the love that doesn't need anything from me, that doesn't require me to be better than I am. The love that makes me better than I am by being inside of me, right? It's like we're talking about how instead of thinking that what I love is you, it's that I am being in love when you inspire me to open that channel up. And I love this Buddhist story about the finger pointing at the moon. Do you know this? So the student asked the teacher, "What is the moon?" And the teacher points at the moon. And the student goes, the moon is a finger, right? We do this all the time. with each other, that I may feel this incredible channel of love open up and move through me, and I think it's because of you. But you're the finger pointing at the moon. The moon is the love. And so instead of attaching it to you and saying, oh, you are the one I have this feeling for, or you have done this to me, it's really just you've allowed me, you've invited me to open this thing that has always been here.
Almost like a remembrance. You've reminded me of the love that exists inside of me.
Yeah, and anything could remind you if you choose it. I've been reminded by people that I super didn't love because of that. It's like, oh, I remember what love is supposed to look like or feel like or be like, and then it opens again. A huge, huge part for me in the practice of non-judgment, which I see to being essential to the practice of love or unconditional welcome, is mercy. Just mercy. You know, this idea of that we have to earn the love or get better or even heal, like this kind of expectation of improvement because what isn't good enough. It's like, oof, mercy. There is nothing wrong with you. You can stay exactly as you are for the rest of your life and be worthy of love. But you can have a better time if you do some healing, you know? It's like, that's kind of how I think of it.
How can we practice empathy in our daily life? Like, what are some tools?
Well, sometimes I ignore the simple stuff because I think everyone's heard it before. But listening is such a big deal. And the listening practices that I teach as a part of the empathy curriculum are special and different from things that I've experienced in other practices because, for example, a lot of us have been taught about active listening, you know, to maintain eye contact, give some verbal cues that you're listening, nod your head, say, repeat back what they said. Like all these things that aren't actually about listening, they're about indicating that you're listening. And communicating that I'm listening is nice, but if I really want to understand, I can do all of those things. I can look at you and I can make those sounds and I can repeat your last thing back to you and still not understand. So I actually teach a 3-part listening practice, which is essentially listening for feeling, listening for facts, listening for context. And the feeling part is really special because I ask people in the workshop, they pair up and share with one another. Usually the prompt is like an empathy challenge in your life, someone that you're having a hard time understanding or who isn't understanding you. And I ask them to share their empathy challenges with each other, wearing earplugs, and not to listen to any of the words, but only to watch their face, only to watch their body and make notes, you know, like not lip read, not try to guess what's going on, but just to say, is this person tired, frustrated? Has this person told this story 1,000 times before? Are they at the end of their rope? Are they really angry? Are they surprised? Like, what do you see? Without knowing the story. And I have them write those things down. And the next time, then we take the earplugs out and we talk about the empathy challenge. And I ask them to totally ignore all of the emotions and don't let them talk about the emotions. If they start talking about their feelings, get to the facts. And this is what I do as a researcher as well. People don't speak in facts, they speak in expressions. And a lot of people's expressions are extremely exaggerated or distorted. You know, it's like I think about, you know, I don't say I'm hungry, I say I'm starving. You know, like this kind of thing, right? I've never been starving. And so I ask people to do that with each other. When they're telling you the story, now they're telling you the story, and ask, when did it start? You know, what's at risk? Who's involved? What role? Like, find out the facts of the situation, ignoring the emotions, but find out enough facts that you can actually draw a diagram of the person's challenge. And this is also an interesting bit. I'm giving away all my secrets right now because it invites you to enter a different part of your brain. You're no longer in this, you know, empathy heart space. You're in an analytical space, but then you go into a visual translation, which changes the way that you're processing that information again. And this is done for a couple of reasons. One, it's fun, but two, the intention for this practice is that it invites different kinds of brains in. Some people are going to be great at the first one, terrible at the second one. Some people are not going to be great at reading body language, but will be incredibly detailed about diagramming the challenge. So it's in part to like give everyone a little something to try. So then in the third one, then we talk about context. Then I ask them not to talk about the challenge at all, but just find out who this person is. Where do they come from? Where, what do they enjoy? What do they fear, believe, and value? Any kind of open question, and just kind of prompt this person to talk about themselves for 5 minutes straight, which for some people is very hard, and other people very easy. But then we kind of look at all this stuff. And what's interesting is that by the end of it, a lot of times you kind of go back to the first visual impressions and think, oh, I actually saw all of it. I did see it. I saw all of this there. I didn't know that I saw it, and we do need to confirm, otherwise we're just making assumptions. But when we practice doing this, we start to get better at seeing so that we can really, really see and connect with a person before we have much information at all, but in a way that's meaningful. They all report that they feel more deeply connected and seen than people that they've known for a long time. And usually I do these workshops with coworkers, some of which have worked together for 14 years and have never asked, never gone, just paid 5 minutes to just hear about who you are.
Wow.
And so for me, it's not just listening to repeat, listening to remember. It's listening to understand. Who's the person? What are they longing for? What gifts are they offering? Are they being received? All those things.
So we've talked about a lot of different concepts. We've talked about honesty. We've talked about non-judgment. We've talked about unconditional welcome. We've talked about cognitive empathy, and also talked about love. If you were to summarize each one of those things in a way that we could really differentiate them, how would you do that?
You're in luck. I've done this very thing recently. I see them as being distinct, and I have also had to make this clarification for myself. But I see, honesty says, I see you as you are. Non-judgment says, I accept you as you are. Unconditional welcome says, you belong here as you are. Love goes a little further, I think, and says you're worthy as you are. You're worthy of that love. And these are separate from cognitive empathy, which I think says, I can see things as you see them. That perspective taking of stepping into your point of view and seeing them that way. It doesn't necessarily, it's not between us. It's about the perspectives, right? It's about the dialogue between the perspectives. But what's really, really magical is that when you practice that cognitive empathy, that non-emotional perspective taking, you accidentally end up at love. Usually. Not always, but sometimes. And that's the best part.
I love that. This conversation has been like so transformative for me. There's just something so powerful in witnessing someone's story.
Yeah.
When I signed on to do this whole show, I had no idea of the profound effect it would have on me. And just witnessing you has profoundly changed me, So I'm just so grateful that you came to share.
Thank you. It is, of course, it's an honor to be witnessed, but I also know that I know what you're talking about. That when you give your attention to another person and let them be in their truth, you get to experience that and you get to experience those parts of yourself waking up as well, which is nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you for hearing and receiving all of that.
Oh, thank you. I'm so deeply touched by everything you shared today.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. You can connect with Into Healing on TikTok and Instagram for more inspirational and behind-the-scenes content, and visit our website, intohealing.com, for transcripts and other goodies. Thank you for joining us.